Skill D. Matching words and categories. 1. Campus life.
Hey, Jill, you're looking down. What's wrong?
Hey, Mike. Man, my whole academic career is in jeopardy. I don't know what to do anymore about my studies.
What do you mean? I thought you were skating through your classes and enjoying it.
That's the disheartening part. I was really enjoying my classes. I really thought social work was the vocation for me, and that I had an aptitude for it.
So, what went wrong?
I just got my statement of grades back from last semester. I got a C- in one of my core classes. That means I can't take the next level. I don't know what to do.
How did you do in your other classes?
Fine, mostly A's and B's. I don't know how I ended up with a C-.
What do you mean? You didn't expect that grade?
No way. I had been doing quite well up until the final exam and term paper. In fact, it had been my best class.
Do you know the grade you earned on your exam and paper?
No, but I must have bombed them to drop my grade down to a C-.
Well, how did you feel about them? I mean, did you work hard on the paper? Did you find the exam really tough?
I worked really hard on that paper. Man, I did tons of research on it. But I guess I didn't write it that well. The exam was tough, but I didn't think I'd done so badly afterwards. I don't want to have to take that class again.
Well, retaking that class is one option if you really want to continue with social work, but there are other options. Have you spoken to your professor about your grade yet?
No, do you think she'll be willing to change it?
Well, first you make sure your grade isn't a mistake. I mean, if you were doing so well and you felt your paper and exam went well, it could just be a simple mathematical slip by the prof. I mean, they do have a ton of work to do with their own research and then grading exams and term papers and adding them up and entering them into the university computer system. I'm sure they make mistakes all the time. In fact, that very thing happened to a friend of mine last year.
I hadn't thought of that. I just assumed that I screwed up.
Another thing you can do is ask the professor to reevaluate your paper, if it did indeed receive a low grade. You said you worked hard on it, and if you really want to continue with your studies, the prof might give you a break on it.
Good idea. I hadn't thought of that either.
As a last resort, you could appeal the grade with the department head, but you have to be really sure the professor has intentionally given you a lower grade than you deserve.
Wow, I don't think that'll be necessary, but I'm definitely going to see my professor and ask her some questions about my grade. Thanks for the advice.
No problem. Good luck.
Number 1. Is each of these courses of action discussed in the dialogue? Mark the correct box. Number 2. What does the man advise the woman to do? Number 3. What is the discussion mainly about? Number 4. What does the man mean when he says this?
What do you mean? I thought you were skating through your classes and enjoying it.
Two. Business administration.
Good afternoon, class. Today we'll be discussing an aspect of business that is becoming more and more popular these days. We talked a little bit about this last class, and you should have read about it in your textbook, so you know that there is a lot of hype about franchising. Why do you think that is?
It's safe?
Exactly. When business people buy a franchise, they are buying a business model that is tried and tested. People know that it works. When starting a new business from scratch, it takes a long time to learn that business, and it takes a significant amount of capital. What's more, it's potentially quite risky. With a franchise, on the other hand, someone else has done the learning already. A franchisee just has to apply that proven business model to garner success. Another thing, a franchisee is buying a product to sell that people not only recognize, but have an established brand loyalty to. Thus, the demand is already established. The most obvious example would be McDonald's restaurants. Everyone knows McDonald's. A new McDonald's franchisee doesn't have to convince consumers to buy the product because they already do. There is a ready-made, established market. Furthermore, franchises involve less startup capital. The franchisee doesn't need to invest as much money in a franchise as he or she would to open up an independent business. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? But what would you say if I told you that new franchises are actually less likely to survive than new independent businesses? Not only that, but they're less profitable as well.
If you weren't my business professor, I wouldn't believe you. So with all these benefits of franchises you just mentioned, the established brand recognition and demand and lower startup costs, why are they less likely to survive or turn a profit?
Well, like I said, franchising is great for some industries like fast food. Now the practice has become so successful that people are trying to apply it to other industries in which it just doesn't work. I'm talking in particular about service businesses. An example would be a chain of auto repair shops. Could anyone guess why it might be more difficult to run a repair shop franchise than a fast food restaurant?
Well, I used to work in a fast food joint. Flipping burgers is easy. Anyone could do it. However, I don't even know how to change the oil in my car, let alone fix anything on it.
Excellent. Good reasoning there. So, in a service business, the business model itself is not as important as the business owner's knowledge and ability. So what you often have is substandard service providers relying on the expertise of the franchisor. Another problem is that franchisors earn their profits from franchising, while franchisees profit from the actual business. What I mean is that it is in the interest of the franchisor to sell more franchises. What do you suppose this means for the individual franchisees?
More competition?
Right on. The market may become diluted. What would happen if they opened 10 new McDonald's restaurants here in town? The demand wouldn't increase. People would just have more options of where to go. So let's say 500 people are going to eat at McDonald's today here in town. Today, that means that the local McDonald's will have 500 customers. Open 10 more McDonald's and each restaurant would only have about 50 customers each.
So you'd be better off opening your own restaurant.
That may be the case. Franchises do still have all the benefits I mentioned earlier. The potential franchisee has to look closely at the franchisor and analyze the potential demand for that proven product in the marketplace. He or she would also have to carefully analyze his or her own skills and acumen in business, as well as the particular service being offered to the consumer. Of course, there are many factors involved. The nice thing about running your own business is that you have freedom. With a franchise, you are tied down by rules set by the franchisor. When running your own business, on the other hand, you can be creative in the ways you generate profit.
Number 1. Match each word or phrase with the correct classification. Put one word in each box. Number 2. Why does the professor mention McDonald's restaurants? Number 3. What are the reasons for independent businesses being more successful than franchises? Choose 2 answers. Number 4. Why does the professor say this?
The market may become diluted. What would happen if they opened 10 new McDonald's restaurants here in town? The demand wouldn't increase. People would just have more options of where to go.
3. Geography.
I'm sure many of you have experienced jet lag. You know, that tired, off feeling you get after traveling across time zones. Today we're going to look a little more closely at time zones. You all know from the readings and our previous lectures about the lines of latitude and longitude, and how they help us locate a given location on a map. Just to review, we've got the equator at 0 degrees latitude. Now, how does the equator divide the Earth again? Is it north-south or east-west?
The equator, it divides the Earth into northern and southern hemispheres.
Right you are. So, all of the lines of latitude run parallel to the equator all the way up or down to each of the poles. The equator is at 0 degrees and the poles are located at 90 degrees, north and south. Then, there are the lines of longitude. And the big one is the prime meridian. It runs from the North Pole through Greenwich, England, to the South Pole and is designated as 0 degrees. On the other side, it goes back up to the North Pole at 180 degrees. Each line of longitude measures the angle from the prime meridian going east or west to 180 degrees. So, for example, let's take a point on the map. I don't know, how about New York City? New York City lies at 41 degrees north latitude and 74 degrees west longitude. But lines of latitude and longitude have more uses than just finding places on maps. Who can tell me another use?
Well, they act as borders sometimes, right?
Good point. Can you give us an example?
Well, most of the border between Canada and the U.S. follows the 49th parallel, right? That's the latitude line of 49 degrees north. And isn't the 38th parallel the border between North and South Korea?
Excellent. Those are some good examples of another way in which people use lines of latitude or longitude. There's another important use, though. Remember I talked about jet lag and time zones? Let's look more at that. Consider this. One day involves one revolution of the Earth on its axis or pole, right? So, one revolution is, naturally, 360 degrees. Okay, and a day is 24 hours. So we can divide 360 by 24 to discover that the Earth spins at a rate of 15 degrees per hour. How is this useful? Time zones, of course. Every 15 degrees of longitude represents a 1-hour time zone, more or less. Of course, this isn't exact. If you happen to live in a place with a time zone line running through it, you wouldn't want one side of town being in one time zone while you were in the other. Nonetheless, the lines of latitude give us a pretty good idea of how the time zones break down. This is how it works. When the sun is directly over a line of longitude, it is noon. East of this line, it is afternoon. West, it's morning. So, for example, if the sun is directly over Thailand, it is noon there. Go about 15 degrees east to the Philippines, and it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Go west about 15 degrees from Thailand to Sri Lanka, and it's 11 a.m. So, let's say we're in Greenwich, England, and we want to call New York. Remember, Greenwich is at 0 degrees longitude and New York is 74 degrees west longitude. So here in Greenwich, it's 7 in the morning. So, what time is it in New York? Just divide 74 degrees by 15. We divide by 15, remember, because that's how fast the Earth spins, 15 degrees per hour. Okay, so 74 divided by 15 is just about 5. So, we're going 5 time zones west of Greenwich, which means we're going 5 hours back. 7 minus 5 is 2, so it's 2 in the morning in New York. Probably not a good time to call. Okay, just to reiterate, time zones are calculated based on the lines of longitude and the spin of the Earth. After doing the math work, we can see that 1 hour of time is the equivalent of 15 degrees traveled by the Earth. You can use this 15 degrees figure to calculate the time difference between two places, which can help you predict how bad your jet lag is going to be on a long trip.
Number 1. With which category are these things associated? Number 2. What aspect of lines of longitude does the professor mainly discuss? Number 3. According to the professor, how many degrees does the Earth spin in 1 hour? Number 4. What does the professor imply when he says this?
If you happen to live in a place with a time zone line running through it, you wouldn't want one side of town being in one time zone while you were in the other.
Four. Campus life.
Hey, Nancy, have you heard about the university's new alcohol policies? Man, it really ticks me off.
I haven't heard anything. What's going on?
They've decided to make it a dry campus.
Wow, that's a big step. I'm not so sure it's a bad idea, though. Why are you so mad about it?
What? Come on. We're all adults here. At least the vast majority of students here are old enough to drink legally.
That's true, but they're not all mature enough to drink responsibly.
Well, who are you or even the university president to judge that? The law says it's okay for them to drink.
Yes, but I've seen enough people drink too much and get themselves in trouble. What is their plan to go dry anyway?
Well, they're not going to serve beer in the bullpen anymore. They're also forbidding students to bring alcohol into their dorm rooms, and they're even assigning extra security guards to the fraternity houses to stop students from drinking.
Those are pretty extreme measures. Have they given their rationale for implementing them?
Yeah. Do you remember last spring, one student died of alcohol poisoning? I think his parents sued the university. These measures must be a reaction to that. They cite statistics on assaults, unruly behavior, and academic performance.
Those all sound like pretty compelling reasons to me. In fact, a friend of mine had some trouble last year after coming home from the bullpen one Friday night. Now she never walks alone on campus at night.
Well, those are good reasons, but it's still disrespectful to those of us who can drink responsibly. In fact, one of the big reasons I decided to live on campus was for the social life. Now the school is killing that. I've got a good mind to sue them for my dorm fees back and get an apartment in a more exciting area off campus.
Hey, Derek, I sympathize with you and all, but you're not really making any sense now.
Yeah, I guess I was going overboard a little there. Okay, I'm not about to sue the school, but I really might move off campus, and I probably won't be the only one.
All right, that's your choice. I think I'll stay in the dorms. It'll still be a convenient place for attending classes, consulting with professors, and doing research in the library. I don't want to spend too much time commuting every day when I could be studying instead.
Yeah, you've got some good points there. Still, if we can't drink on campus, then a lot of students will be going to other areas of the city to drink and have fun. This means we'll likely see an increase in drunk driving charges, maybe even injuries and deaths. In the end, I'm not sure if they're improving the health of the student body or just sweeping the problem under the carpet, so to speak.
That's a pretty strong argument. I think you should take it up with the president.
I just might write him a letter.
Number 1. Are these statements true about the new university policies? Mark the correct box. Number 2. What is the woman's opinion of the university's new alcohol policies? Number 3. What are the reasons for the university changing their alcohol policies? Choose 3 answers. Number 4. According to the man, what may be a negative consequence of the new policy? Five. Music.
What comes to mind when you think of romantic music?
Love songs? Ballads?
Aha! Yes, the term romantic now calls to mind images such as roses, candles, and flowers, but this is not the meaning of romantic music. It was not specifically music to listen to on a date. Remember, there are 3 periods of pre-20th century European classical music. The first is Baroque, which occurred between the year 1600 and 1760. Baroque music is typified by Johann Sebastian Bach. Musical performances became larger and more complex during this period. Also, opera became established in the Baroque period. The second is the classical period, typified by Mozart. It took place between the years 1730 and 1820. In general terms, classical period music focused more on clarity and simplicity than Baroque period works. The third period, which we'll be focusing on today, ran from about 1800 to 1900 and is called the Romantic period. The name implies that the expression of feeling or emotion through the music became more important than the structure, rules, or formal systems of the music. This trend actually continued into the 20th century in many respects as well. So, how did they achieve this greater expressive power in the music? Well, we see many new chord forms appearing in the 19th century. These forms would have been regarded as dissonant, cacophonous, or simply as the incorrect form of a similar chord in previous times. However, as Romantic composers proved, a strange chord in an appropriate context can be extremely expressive. Romantic composers also made much greater use of key changes, and they played around with the format of musical pieces. For example, the traditional third movement in a symphony is a sonata, a very soft, relaxing piece. Many Romantic composers replaced this with the scherzo, a much more intense piece, in order to gain greater power of expression. The sheer size of orchestras and the lengths of pieces saw a significant increase in the Romantic period. In fact, Gustav Mahler's Eighth Symphony is also known as the Symphony of 1,000 because it took so many people to play it. Also, in the classical period, a symphony lasted about 25 minutes. A Romantic symphony, however, often lasts up to 45 minutes. We also saw new instruments such as the piccolo become popular during this period. Another major difference between the Romantic period and the classical period that preceded it was the motivation behind the work. Nearly all Romantic pieces have a program or theme, often based on a book, painting, myth, or folktale. For instance, Hector Berlioz created the theme of his Symphonie Fantastique himself. Through the symphony, Berlioz tells the story of how a young artist falls in love with a woman who doesn't return his love. You can probably guess the tragic end to this story told through music. Character pieces also came into being during the Romantic period. These are short pieces dedicated to a particular mood or feeling. They are usually played only on the piano. Composers such as Chopin and Schumann favored this approach. Opera was also affected. Many of the distinct movements began to blend together into a continuous flow of music. To recap then, the Romantic period of music had little to do with love, as we now associate with the word romantic. It was a period of musical work that followed the classical period and the Baroque period before that. Romantic period music stressed the importance of expressing emotion over careful attention to form and musical structure. New chords were added and the arrangements of symphonies were altered. In addition, the length of symphonies and the number of instruments needed to play them both increased dramatically. Finally, romantic pieces tended to have a theme or story expressed through the music. All in all, Romantic composers opened music up to a wide range of new possibilities, eventually leading to the atonal or serial movements of the 20th century.
Number 1. Match each musical innovation with the appropriate category. Number 2. What is the talk mainly about? Number 3. According to the professor, what was the musical period directly before the Romantic period? Number 4. Why does the professor say this?
The name implies that the expression of feeling or emotion through the music became more important than the structure, rules, or formal systems of the music.
Six. Literature.
Okay, class. Today we're going to continue our series of lectures looking at influential British authors. Today's topic is someone I'm sure you're all familiar with in one way or another. Who can tell me a little bit about Robert Louis Stevenson?
Wasn't he the guy that wrote The Ugly Duckling and several other short stories?
No, you're thinking of the Danish author Hans Christian Andersen. The names are pretty similar, but Robert Louis Stevenson was from Scotland. He was also a famous author, though.
That name is really familiar. I'm sure I read one of his books as a kid. Did he write children's books?
You're getting closer. He didn't specifically write children's books, but one of his books became a famous tale that many children the world over have read. It's about pirates.
Oh, I know. He wrote Treasure Island, right?
Yes, that's right. You probably know him best for Treasure Island and The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But these are not his only works. In his time, he was known as a great author of travel books, short stories, and literary articles, in addition to fictional novels. Born in 1850 in Edinburgh, Mr. Stevenson had poor health right from his childhood. He suffered from tuberculosis, a disease affecting the lungs. This sickness would greatly affect the course of Stevenson's life as he moved from place to place trying to find a climate suitable for his condition. He first went to school to study engineering but later changed to law. He passed the Scottish bar exam in 1875 at the age of 25. But he never actually got around to practicing much law. Instead, he spent his time writing essays, short stories, and travel pieces. He published a book called An Inland Voyage based on his canoe tour of Belgium and France in 1878. On this trip, he also met his wife, Fanny Osborne. They got married in 1880 and moved to California for a while. Then they went back to Scotland, but never really permanently settled there. They kept moving around in search of better climates for the rest of Stevenson's life. Stevenson became famous with his pirate adventure novel Treasure Island, published in 1883, when he was 33 years old. 3 years later, he published Kidnapped, as well as his most famous work, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Who can tell me about this story? I'm sure you've all seen it in one form or another. There was even a version featuring Bugs Bunny and Porky Pig, if I recall correctly.
Sure, I know that one. That's the story of the scientist who drinks some chemical formula and becomes a big, mean monster. Something like the Hulk, right?
Well, you're on the right track for sure. The Hulk is somewhat of a derivative of Stevenson's Hyde character. I find it interesting to note, though, that in the book, the evil Hyde is actually physically smaller than the good Dr. Jekyll. Hyde's monstrosity was not in his muscular build, but in his selfish character. In fact, Jekyll and Hyde was actually based on a nightmare Stevenson had. His wife woke him up from the dream, and he was angry that she had interrupted the story. He later wrote a draft of it and read it to his wife. She suggested expanding the idea into a novel. Originally, he was reluctant, but finally agreed. Stevenson actually burned the first draft. He rewrote it in a mere 3 days, and after it was published, it soon became a sweeping success. Its main point was to criticize the two-facedness of people in society, especially upper-class Londoners. That is, the emphasis of appearances over substance and character. Stevenson was also busy at this time writing a lot of articles for publication in various literary journals. The most famous one, A Humble Remonstrance, first appeared in 1884, the year after the publication of Jekyll and Hyde. Stevenson's article was a response to The Art of Fiction, an article published by his friend the American philosopher Henry James. Stevenson spent the latter part of his life living on the South Pacific island of Samoa, where he wrote several works featuring aspects of Polynesian culture and criticizing European colonialism. In fact, his collection of essays on life on various Pacific islands is quite fascinating. It's called In the South Seas, in case anyone is interested in it.
Number 1. Match each title with the correct classification. Number 2. What is the talk mainly about? Number 3. According to the professor, where did Stevenson spend the last years of his life? Number 4. What does the professor imply when he says this?
He passed the Scottish bar exam in 1875 at the age of 25, but he never actually got around to practicing much law.
Skill E, making inferences and predictions. 1. Campus life.
What's the matter, John?
Oh, I'm just really frustrated at the moment. My midterm paper for my philosophy class is due at 5 o'clock, and I have to type it out, but the computer lab is always packed with people. No matter what time of the day I go there, there is always a waiting list a mile long to get on a computer.
Which computer lab do you go to?
What do you mean, which lab? The only computer lab I know of is the one in the basement of the library.
Actually, there are several computer labs around campus. The one in the basement of the library is the biggest, but that is probably why everyone goes there. That, or like you, they don't know about the others. Personally, I use the computers in Anderson Hall.
Anderson Hall? Isn't that the business administration building?
Yeah, they only have about a dozen computers in that lab, but it's pretty easy to find free ones there. I guess not many people know about it.
I had a business class there last semester, but I never saw a computer lab in that building.
It's kind of hidden away. My roommate's an accounting major. She spends most of her time in that building, and she told me about it.
So where is it then?
Do you know where the student lounge is in Anderson Hall?
It's on the second floor, right? The first room you come to at the top of the stairs at the front of the building, I mean.
Right, and a couple of doors down from that is the copy room. Go in there and you'll find another door that goes into the business computer lab.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I always thought that door went into some kind of storage room. They should put a sign on it or something.
Maybe, but it's kind of nice that no one knows about it.
And anybody can use it? I mean, I'm not a business major. If I went in there and tried to use the computers, would anybody kick me out?
I don't think so. Even if they were reserved for business students, I don't think they'd care. I mean, like I said before, there are usually a couple of free computers. If there were people waiting, they might say something, but that's never happened to me. Anytime I go there, no one even asks for my student ID or anything. I just sign in and start working. And I really don't think there's ever been a time when somebody was waiting for a computer to become free.
I think I'll go over to Anderson after my next class and check it out. Thanks for the tip. I might actually get this paper in on time.
Number 1. What can be inferred about the man? Number 2. How does the woman feel about the lab in Anderson Hall? Number 3. What will the man probably do? Number 4. What does the woman imply when she says this?
It's kind of hidden away.
Two. History.
There certainly seems to be a lot more interest in history these days, especially personal or family history. That's why I wanted to take some time in class to talk about non-academic historical research. You probably know this type of research better as genealogy. Genealogy is the investigation of family histories. Professional genealogists use written records and stories people tell in order to learn about where and when people lived and about their lifestyles. Aside from strictly personal interest, the information they gather can lead to reunions of families who have been disrupted by adoption, foster care, or immigration. This type of research could also lead to family reunions of distant relatives. But professionals as well as people who undertake genealogy as a hobby have to be careful. Genealogical investigations are not always based on reliable data. Well, before we talk about unreliable data, maybe we should list some different kinds of data that someone might look at when they do this kind of research. People might use census returns, birth, death, and marriage records, and even maps to determine when, where, and how relatives lived. But these records are not always accurate, as we shall see. Some types of information tend to be more accurate than others. So wary genealogists start with the most accurate information and then try to fill in whatever blanks they can't fill by using less reliable information. Let's start at the top. The most accurate type of information is place names. So genealogists rely most on information containing the names of cities and towns. Place names are long-lasting and seldom change. So, information related to the place of an event is often accurate. Are any of you interested in doing genealogy? Here is a rule of thumb for determining where someone was born. Actually, 2 rules, because it is different for men and women. Historically, a woman would typically get married in the same place where she was born. So, if you find a marriage certificate, there is a good chance that the bride was born in the same place where the wedding took place. Not so for men. With men, actually, you look at where they were buried. Men were usually buried in the area in which they were born. This makes sense when you think about it. In old times, women worked in the home. Men usually took over the family business. So while weddings traditionally took place in the bride's hometown, she would probably move with her new husband to his hometown after marriage, where he would probably take over the family business. In the old days, they would most likely stay there for the rest of their lives. So, if a man was buried in a town, there's a good chance he was born there. But for women, better to examine her marriage certificate to find out where she was born. Then we have names. Even names are not as reliable as you might think. Surnames, or what most people refer to as last names, are more reliable than first names, but not by much. Surnames have so many differences in spelling, it is difficult to tell whether people were related or not. Now, we wouldn't use first names to determine if people were related, but we still might be misled by first names. For one thing, they are really trendy. You get a lot of the same names recurring within each generation. Nicknames were common too. In one village, for example, you might have 3 girls named Elizabeth. One goes by Beth, one by Lizzie, and one by Betty. On this census return, unfortunately, they are all Elizabeth, and they've all got brothers Jack, John, and Jonathan. Another complication is that sometimes the same name will reappear in the same family, even in the same generation. This is because, long ago, many children died in their infancy, and parents would often recycle the name when the next baby of the same gender was born. So baby Mary died at birth, and then another baby Mary came along who survived. Both go into the record books. The least reliable information of all is dates. You can't even trust the dates that were reported on census returns. For one thing, people lie about their age. And another problem in the past was that census takers weren't very accurate either. They didn't want to be bothered with lots of different data to manage, so they would round people's ages off to the nearest 5.
Number 1. According to the speaker, what can be inferred about genealogical research? Number 2. What would be considered the most reliable data in genealogical research? Number 3. What does the professor imply about women after they get married? Number 4. Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
So baby Mary died at birth, and then another baby Mary came along who survived. Both go into the record books.
What does the professor mean when he says this?
Both go into the record books.
Three. Biology.
Have you ever wondered how we know which plants are good to eat and which ones are poisonous? Well, it was simply a very long and drawn-out process of trial and error. Throughout history, people ate what they could find, kill, or otherwise get a hold of. When there was a lack of a traditional food source, people had to try new things. Over time, they started to figure out which plants made them sick and which didn't. Now, I'm not just talking about ancient times before farming became established. This trial and error with plants was going on well into the 18th and 19th centuries. In fact, historical records indicate that in the 1800s, plant poisoning had become a serious issue. Since food wasn't as readily available then as it is today, people were forced to take more chances with what they ate. Rather than drop by the market at the end of the street, people would have to wander out into the fields or forests and find whatever looked edible. Today, because the food supply is rather ample and stable, we rarely have to go find our lunch or dinner out in the woods. Nonetheless, we still need to be careful. Poisonous plants can be found all around us, in our homes as decoration, in our lawns, and in the general landscape. Of course, we don't generally go around putting random plants in our mouths. However, children do. Have any of you ever caught your baby brother or sister chewing on one of the plants in your house? Or maybe you were caught chewing on one. Considering the fact that a baby's body is smaller and less hardy than ours, we have to look out for them. A small amount of poison that might go unnoticed in an adult can cause more serious harm to a child. So, poisonous plants are dangerous to kids, but there are measures that can be taken to ensure safety. You can identify the plants in your surroundings by giving a call to your local garden center. You can describe the plant to them, and hopefully they can tell you whether or not it has poisonous properties. Alternatively, you can take the plant down to show them. Also, if you buy a new plant, it is wise to ask whether or not it is poisonous. Now, there are 3 main categories of toxicity in plants: extremely toxic, moderately toxic, and minimally toxic. These names, however, are very misleading. You see, the severity of the poison depends on a host of other factors, like the particular plant and the metabolism of the person. The term poisoning itself is actually also misleading. Poisoning doesn't only mean a person dies from the poison. Poisoning can result in anything from indigestion and skin irritation to lethal brain damage or death. Let's talk about a few categories of poisonous plants now. One category is the alkaloids. These are bitter-tasting plants with nitrogen compounds in them. A good example is hemlock. I mention it as an example because hemlock is famous. History buffs in the class may recall that it was the poison extracted from this plant that Socrates was forced to drink as his death sentence for corrupting the youth of Athens. That's just an interesting side note. Anyway, the effects of hemlock are similar to nicotine, but obviously much more severe, as it can cause the nervous system to shut down, resulting in death. Plants with minerals in them form another category of poisonous plants. These plants build up a large amount of some mineral that is toxic in humans, such as lead or copper. The effects of eating these plants can include psychological malfunctioning and, in higher doses, death. Plants containing oxalates are the third category. Oxalates, spelled OXALATES, occur as small crystals in the plant and irritate the mouth. Not quite as serious as the other two, but poison nonetheless. Once again, those three categories of poisonous plants are the alkaloids, plants with minerals, and oxalates. So you may be wondering, why did poisonous plants evolve? What purpose does this serve? Well, there are many different sources of poison in different plants, as we just heard, but in most cases, the poison is a byproduct of one of the plant's natural life processes, and the poison serves as a defense mechanism for the plant. Animals learn which plants to stay away from because they get sick when they eat them. So it follows that the plant will survive and reproduce because no one is eating it.
Number 1. What does the professor imply about people who searched for wild plants to eat in the 1800s? Number 2. How does the professor feel about keeping plants inside the house? Number 3. Which is true about hemlock? Number 4. Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
Oxalates, spelled OXALATES, occur as small crystals in the plant and irritate the mouth. Not quite as serious as the other two, but poison nonetheless.
What does the professor imply about oxalates? Four. Drama.
Welcome to Theater 351 Stage Management. Some of you may have worked as volunteer stage managers in the past. As such, you have probably developed your own habits, working practices, and manners of relating to the cast and crew, but you are taking this class for a reason, correct? You want to learn how to do these things properly. If you thought you knew all there is to know about stage management, you wouldn't be here. So, you've got all that amateur experience. Forget it. Clear all of your old habits and techniques from your mind. The truth is, you most likely either didn't learn much at all, or you learned how to be a typical amateur stage manager. I'm going to teach you to be an effective professional stage manager. Okay, now the second thing I need you to do is to appreciate the responsibility of this position. A great deal of the success of the show depends on you. You are foremost responsible for every aspect of the performance, of the technical crew, and for the preparedness of the stage, set, and props. This includes every cue in the show. You must know exactly where in the script the cue occurs and ensure that the crew and equipment is prepared to make the necessary technical adjustments. This is important too. Keep records of all of the decisions made during rehearsals and meetings. This can prevent a lot of arguments and confusion down the road. For example, let's say it is decided that a certain cue will be changed, and then a while later, an actor says that no one ever told him about the change. If you have a written record, you can get it out and show him the meeting or the rehearsal in which it was decided. I might add, too, that when people know that records are being kept, they tend to make more of an effort to be responsible and remember what's going on. Another thing you are responsible for is the safety of the cast and crew. This is, of course, of paramount importance. You must arrive early to every rehearsal, without exception, in order to inspect the stage for safety hazards, such as loose nails, weak boards, ramps, and stairs. You should also make sure that all exits are marked with glow tape so that actors and crew will be able to move around safely in the dark. Further, you must be aware of the location of the first aid kit and fire extinguishers, and you should be certified in CPR and first aid. Taking this course won't give you this certification, but I will be giving you information later in the semester about certification courses you can take. These are offered by paramedics at the fire station. The third thing I need you to do is get rid of any ideas you may have about the stage manager being a privileged person, someone with lots of assistants and an attitude. If you come in late wearing sunglasses and barking orders at people, you are not doing your job effectively. You're also letting people know that you are not a professional stage manager. First off, a professional is polite and treats people with respect. Secondly, a professional always remains calm and never yells at others or panics. If people see the stage manager panicking at a performance, this panic can easily spread throughout the rest of the cast and crew. Needless to say, the overall performance will suffer. Thirdly, you have to learn to delegate authority as stage manager. As I've said, you have a tremendous responsibility. Don't think that you can do it all yourself. You have assistants, so use them, but always do so politely, especially if you are working with volunteers. After all, they're not getting paid. They're working because they want to have an enjoyable experience. If you treat them badly, they'll probably leave. At the same time, don't expect your assistants to do it all, and don't expect them to do all the menial tasks either, while you do the important ones. Get used to the idea that stage managers do make coffee, go on food runs, make photocopies, etc. It is of utmost importance that you maintain a good rapport with everyone. Part of your responsibility of making sure the performance comes off without a hitch is to make sure that everyone is content and feels like part of the team. The three most important things you'll learn then are preparation of cast and stage, workplace safety, and creating and maintaining a positive rapport with all the people involved in the production.
Number 1. What can be inferred about this lecture? Number 2. How does the professor feel about the role of the stage manager? Number 3. What does the professor imply about assistant stage managers? Number 4. Listen to part of the lecture again, then answer the question.
If you thought you knew all there is to know about stage management, you wouldn't be here. So, you've got all that amateur experience. Forget it.
What does the professor mean when he says this?
Forget it.
Five. Campus life.
I'm kind of nervous about the test tomorrow. Want to sit down over here and go over the notes from class together?
Okay, but do you mind if we sit somewhere else? People are smoking here.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know it bothered you so much. Let's go over there.
Thanks. Yeah, it really does bother me. Frankly, I think it's gross. I don't see why the campus just doesn't go totally smoke-free. All of the buildings are smoke-free now. Why don't they just put an end to smoking on campus altogether?
I don't know if they could. I mean, we're all adults here, and you're not really hurting anyone else by smoking outside. I guess they don't want to deny people their right to smoke if they want to.
Well, they're already denying smokers the right to buy cigarettes.
What do you mean?
None of the convenience stores or vending machines on campus sell cigarettes.
Well, I wouldn't really call that denying people the right to buy cigarettes. It's the university's prerogative whether they want to sell tobacco products or not. People are free to leave campus to buy a pack. Is that true, though? That you can't buy cigarettes on campus? I hadn't noticed that they didn't sell smokes on campus anymore.
Yeah, it's true. The closest place to buy a pack of cigarettes around here is the Speedy Mart across University Boulevard.
Yeah, that's where I always go to buy them.
You smoke? I had no idea. I've never seen you with a cigarette.
Well, I don't smoke habitually. Sometimes I have a smoke when I want to take a break from studying. Of course, that means I have to go outside the library or outside my dorm building, but I don't mind so much. It gives me a chance to stretch my legs. The walk helps clear my mind, so I can focus better when I go back to hit the books.
So, if our campus ever did go completely smoke-free, I guess you'd be pretty upset.
Well, it would inconvenience me a little, but I wouldn't be that upset. I can quit any time. I guess I just smoke now because the opportunity exists.
So, you're saying you would quit if the campus was smoke-free?
Yeah, I guess I probably would.
Well, in that case, I think that's an excellent argument in favor of a fully smoke-free campus. Maybe there are lots of students like you who would actually give up smoking if there were no places to do it around here.
Yeah, I guess so, but I think most smokers are more addicted than I am. You sure are anti-smoking, aren't you? Why is that?
Well, I used to smoke in high school, but then I finally wised up and quit before I graduated. Now I find the smell of smoke revolting.
Number 1. What can be inferred about the students? Number 2. How does the man feel about a completely smoke-free campus? Number 3. What will the man probably do? Number 4. Listen to part of the conversation. Then answer the question.
Yeah, that's where I always go to buy them.
You smoke? I had no idea.
What does the woman mean when she says this?
I had no idea.
Six. Business.
Investing money is risky. Naturally, you want to make money, not lose it. So any investment decision has to be carefully thought out. Once you have decided to invest some money, you need to decide how you are going to invest it. This is a big decision, and you need to learn about risk management. There are many factors to be considered in risk management, and I am going to go over 3 major ones today. They are business risk, valuation risk, and force of sale risk. So, first you need to think about business risk. You are investing in a company, and in order for you to earn money, that company has to earn money. So, if its profits suffer due to competition or mismanagement, your earning power is decreased too. So, how are you, as an investor, to know whether a company will be successful? Well, you need to look at the company's business plan and determine whether or not you think they have a solid plan for making a profit. But it doesn't have to be all guesswork. There are certain indicators that can give you a clue as to good or bad investments. One indicator is franchise value. Franchise value refers to the ability of the company to raise prices. You see, if some other factor contributes to loss of profits, like increased wages or increased costs of materials, the company needs to raise prices, right? Some types of businesses can do this easily. Those are the ones with franchise value. Other businesses without franchise value cannot increase prices because people will stop buying their products. These are called commodity-type businesses. Commodity-type businesses do not have the flexibility to raise prices because their sales are based on low prices, not on a factor like name recognition. So, if the economy is not doing well, a commodity-type business probably won't do well either, because their costs will go up. Okay, so once you have found a business that looks strong, you need to consider valuation risk. This is risk that is based on the relative value of different stocks. Just because a company looks like it is going to do well does not mean that you should invest. You have to consider the price of the stock relative to the price of other stocks. Remember what we talked about last time? Opportunity cost equals opportunity lost. As I mentioned before, this means that when you choose to invest in one opportunity, you are losing all kinds of other opportunities to invest. So it may come down to this. One company looks strong, but you have to invest a lot of money. Another company might not look quite so attractive, but the stock is not as expensive. In the end, you might make more money on the less attractive company because you can buy significantly more stock of that company. This is valuation risk. You see, a company might have an excellent business plan, and you might reasonably expect the company to grow. However, if their stock is overvalued, that means that they are basing the value on their forecasted growth and not on their current growth. Any number of events could occur that might prevent that projected growth from taking place. So, like I said, you might be better off buying a different stock that is being sold at face value. In essence, when assessing valuation risk, do not just ask, "Is this company a good investment?" but ask, "Is this company a good investment at this price?" Now, once you find a company with both low business risk and low valuation risk, there is still one more risk to consider, and that is force of sale risk. This has to do with the time period in which you are expecting to see your investment turn into significant gains. If you are planning on making money by a certain date, you are taking a very big risk. Here is a good rule of thumb to follow. In the stock market, you might be able to know what is going to happen, but not when. Did you get that? You may know what, but you don't know when. You should never count on seeing your investment grow in a certain time period. So, ultimately, you are looking to minimize risk by investing in a company that is going to make money in good times and in bad. But you also want to buy stocks at a reasonable price in order to decrease valuation risk. And you want to be flexible about when you wish to cash in your stocks, minimizing your force of sale risk.
Number 1. What does the professor imply about the investment decisions discussed in the lecture? Number 2. What can be inferred about a commodity-type company? Number 3. According to the professor, what is possible to know about the stock market? Number 4. Why does the professor say this?
Remember what we talked about last time? Opportunity cost equals opportunity lost.